Hello, thank you for tuning into my channel. I'm going to finish up Fifi Fox today. So if you want to see how I used this pattern to make this cute little fox, please stay tuned. I'm very excited to continue working on this Fifi Fox pattern from Funky Friends Factory. And I have the pattern here. I purchased this pattern on Etsy, and I reached out to Pauline MacArthur at the Funky Friends Factory to make sure that it was okay that I made a tutorial about how to put this fox together. They graciously agreed, and so that's what I'm doing. I will link the Etsy shop and the Funky Friends Factory website so that you can go and check it out. If you decide to purchase this pattern, please let them know that you saw my videos and that you are interested in the pattern because of that. So far, I have prepared all of my pieces. I cut out the patterns. I made templates from some template plastic that I got online, and then I cut out my pattern pieces and I've started stitching. I have already made the head, and I stitched the part of the body together here, and I will link my previous video where I show you that. I also have a video where I showed preparing everything before I got started. So right now, hopefully today, my goal is to finish sewing the fox. So we're gonna just start with where I left off. For each one of these, they give you exactly what you're going to be doing, and then little boxes so that you can check everything off. And it's really helpful. I have not checked everything off, but I have a video to document what I'm doing, so that makes it a little bit easier for me. Now I have my outer fabric is this knit, and my inner fabric is some shirting that I had left over from making some memory pillows. I also am using pins and then just my normal sewing supplies. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just start where it says front legs here. And on the pattern pieces, they do have grain markings, and they have some letters to help you know where to sew. So I'm going to be using that to help me put everything in place. Because I'm using a knit, I do have a ballpoint needle in my sewing machine. Okay, so this says that I'm going to sew the front leg pieces to the tummy piece from A to B. And so it has on the pattern pieces for the front legs and for the tummy, it has the A marking and the B marking. And so that's where I'm going to be sewing. I'm going to turn the camera around and zoom in a little bit so that you can see what I'm talking about. Do a little bit of pinning, and then we can start sewing. So I've kind of lined up my pieces here so you can kind of see how they're going to go together. This is some curve piecing, so just be aware of that. So it has the two dots. That's what has to match. So on this side, I think it goes like this, and so I have my piece here. And then on the other side, the two dots will go, let me see, like this. Okay, so I'm going to turn these pieces right sides together, do a little pinning, and then start sewing. I'm going to match the A line, which is here, with B, which is right here. So let's see, let's do A first. Okay. And I'm a little bit nervous about this because this is a pretty steep curve, but I think that I'll be okay. And then B is going to be right here. And then if you look at the pattern, the B does not go all the way to the edge. So you can see, like, here is H. So the B is going to go right up top here. And so I'm going to give that a pin. Let me turn it a little bit more. like that so it can line up. And then pin it. Let's see, I probably should pin it this way so it goes toward the seam. Okay. And then I'm going to change this pin too so it goes toward the seam, like so. Okay, now I'm going to pin the rest of this in and just kind of ease it in, and it should fit. And I'm going to pin this one a pretty good bit because it's a steep curve. Okay. And then even though I'm a little bit nervous, let me make sure you can see that. Yeah. Even though I'm a little bit nervous, it seems to be easing in nicely. Okay. Oh, look at that. So I'm going to pin it first and then I'm going to show you both sides. There we go. All right, so there's one side, and then here is the other side. There's a little bit of fluff there. I'm a little bit nervous, but I think it's going to stitch out because of the 1/4 inch seam allowance. I think it'll be okay. Because of the nature of this curve, I'm going to go ahead and stitch it down, and then I'll come back and pin the other side. So let's see how this works. I'm going to see if I can zoom the camera in on the sewing machine. And there we go. And the pattern does specify a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I do have my patchwork foot on the machine. And since it's a ballpoint needle, I'm not doing my normal leader ender. So I'm just going to pull these threads kind of tight so that the seam can get started, or the stitch can get started. And then I'm going to back stitch. Okay. And I'll pull the pins out as I go. So this is... I've stitched that one side of the front leg to the body. Let me show you both sides. It did ease in nicely, no puckers. You saw that I had a few little needle or thread issues. I can't tell, but it seems to be holding nicely. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and pin the other side and stitch it down, and then I'll clip all of these curves. I'll speed up the video so you can see the whole process starting now. step is to sew the tummy and front leg pieces to the body. So this is the tummy and front legs. Here are the body pieces. And it says from CAE. And so if we look at our pattern pieces, we're sewing this side to what would be this side. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pin it. It's this seam. So I'm kind of interested to see how that happens. But I'm going to pin it first and then sew it. I'm going to only do one side of this at a time because I'm going to have to sew it on the other side as well. But I'm going to just pin one side and then stitch it, then pin the other side and stitch it. So here we go. And the front leg pieces connected to the body pieces here. Let me show you these seams. I didn't think that these would fit because of the curve of this, but look at that. That is very cool. Okay, and so I'm going to leave it right side in, wrong side out for right now because I feel like I need it that way. The next thing we need to do is sew the front foot pieces together from E to D. So that's going to be these seams, and then it says to clip the seam very well. So after I sew both of these, I'm going to clip the seams nicely, and then we'll see what's next. Here we go. Oh, this will do it because it's ballpoint. Hold on, I need to change out my needle. Okay, now it says to sew the front foot pieces to the body and front leg pieces. And it says we're sewing G to E to G. So on the body and the front leg, that's these seams. And then on the feet, it's like right sides together like this. So here is the body and front leg that I'm working with. And so this is G, E, G. And so I'm going to place these right sides together. Here's the G seam and the other G seam. And it looks like it's going to meet up at the E seam. Because of the nature of this seam, I am going to pin, but I think I can pin both sides at once and then sew both sides at once. So here we go. Okay, next it says to sew the front foot pieces closed at the back from F to G, and then to continue to sewing the front leg from G to B to H. Okay, so for F and G, F is the back of the foot, the bottom part, and then G is at the top of the foot. So I'm going to stitch that. And then it says G to B to H. So G, let me show you here. On the tummy, G is here, so which is right here at this little crook. And then B is here on the tummy. And then H is at the edge. So all of that is going to get stitched together. I hope you can see that. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pin this first. I'm going to pin the seam where the seams meet. So hopefully that'll go together first. Ouch. Just stuck my finger. Okay, and then I'm going to do the foot here. And normally I wouldn't even pin the foot. It's just that that I want the rest of it to match up, so I feel like I need to pin it all. Okay, so, and then let me see. So this has that, it's a weird little crook here from G to H on the body part of it. So I'm just going to hold it together and pin it the best way I can. Because I'm a little bit nervous about this part. And I'm left-handed, so the hand that I'm holding it with is getting in the way. So let's see. I'm just going to, I think it's going to match. I hope it matches. So, because it seems like H should be all the way out here. But right now it's not, it doesn't have any stretch. So I'm a little bit nervous about that, but we're just going to see what we can do. Let's see, I wonder if I can just match the end of it and then just kind of finagle it in there. So here's the end. Okay. Okay. And then hopefully the rest of that will ease in there somehow. And I'm not really sure how that's going to happen, because there doesn't really appear to be enough space for that. But I don't know. We're just going to see if it works. But I am going to pin it as tight as I can. And then, yep, I have too much extra fabric in there, it feels like. But we'll just see what happens. I'm nervous to do that, but I'm going to pull it up a little bit and see if that helps. I think ideally this little part would have a little bit more stretch in it. But I'm just not seeing that right now. I'm going to go ahead and pin the other side as well. Okay. So I've stitched those seams. So I've stitched the front foot closed at the back, and then I've continued to stitch up there to H. And right here you can see it's kind of tight there. So just be mindful of that. It probably will help if you go right with the grain lines. I may have missed that part. So my grain lines may be a little bit weird, and that's why there, it doesn't seem like there's quite enough room. And then here it is on the other side. I actually went back, and where it was really close, I just stitched it again, stitched over those stitches so it'll hopefully stay closed. Okay, next we're gonna sew the foot pads on to the front feet, matching D and E. So this part, D, well, it says D and E, but on the pattern pieces it's D and F. So I'm going to put the D part, which is the, if you look at the foot pad, let me see, D is a little bit wider at the top, so it's the center of the top and the center of the bottom. So I'm just going to pin these seams. The little marking is going to go right on the seam line here. Okay, so I'm just kind of opening that seam so I can put the line it up with that part of the foot pad. Give it a quick pin. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom part with F. Cut off these threads. Okay, and then I'm just opening the seam allowance right there. And then I'm just going to line the mark up with the seam. Okay. Alright. And then I'm going to kind of find, I like to find like a little halfway point on either side. So I'm going to do halfway here, which is, I think, is about there. I'm just kind of estimating. Halfway, and pin it, and then I'm going to do the other side halfway, and pin, okay, and this is an estimate. I'm sure I'm not exactly halfway, but I'm just kind of giving myself some reference points. Then I'm going to go halfway in between those and put a pin. So halfway between each one of these little points. And pin. And what I'm trying to do is hopefully I'm reducing the puckering by pushing the little parts that might pucker. I'm kind of pushing those towards the center so that I can get a smooth stitch all the way around. Halfway, then halfway here. And halfway here. And I think what I'm going to do is, just for the sake of not having a pucker, because I really don't want it to pucker if it, I think that's the word, or put unnecessary pleats in these. I'm just going to go one more time in between each of the pins. Next, the pattern says to sew the inner back leg pieces to the outer back leg pieces from J to K and clip the seam very well. I pull my plastic pieces out, and so J to K is right here. So J, K, and then on the other one, on the inner back leg, it's from J to K. So this definitely will need some pinning first. I'm going to flip the pieces right sides together and then go ahead and pin this, because I'm not sure what's going to happen with this curve. I'm going to pin it, and then I'm going to stitch it. Since they're two separate pieces, I'm going to pin both of them first, and then I will start sewing. So right now I'm just pinning the edges first. Okay, I have the inner back leg pieces and the outer back leg. So I have the back leg pieces here, and I have to stitch them together, and it says I have to sew these to the body and tummy from LJHP. Now on the body, it has the inner leg seam, and H is the part in that little crook that I did earlier. Okay, so HJL is going to be this seam, and on here it is this seam. Okay, let me see. Can you see that? Okay, yeah. So on the body, it's this seam. So all I have to do is take these pieces and sort of match them up. And on this part, it's this side. So this is P, and then down here is L. Let me make sure that's right. I had to pull the outer part. Okay, so this is L and J, and then here's P over here. So I'm going to pin these first, and so it's this part right here. So I'm going to pin L to L. And for this part, I really did grab the pattern pieces and like hold them up and see what's what. And then this is P, and here is P. And I'm a little bit concerned because these curves don't seem to match up right now. But I'm just gonna do the. Let me make sure that's yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna do it. And then I'm going to pin towards the seam and see how it works itself out. On that last one, doing the inner leg to the outer leg, you saw that it didn't look like it was going to go, and then it magically fit. So I'm just going to go with that. I think that's the way it's going to work here. And I'm going to match the seam here. Not 100% sure if that's right. Actually, let me see. J... Actually, that's not right, because J is actually the top of this. So for this one, J is going to match this dot right here. There's a mark for J. So I'm going to match this seam with this mark and pin. And I'm glad I looked at that. Okay. And it's good that Pauline gave us some reference points here. That's awesome. I'm actually pinning on the other side, so let me just make sure it's good and matched up before I pin it. Okay. All right, so I have the major reference points matched up. Now I think I can just go ahead and line up the rest of it and get it matched up. Again, not really sure how it's going to work out, but so far it's usually just worked out. So I'm going to just pin it, go a little bit at a time and get it pinned and see how it matches up. Okay. And then this one looks a little funny, but I'm just going to squeeze it in there because that's where it's supposed to go. Oh, and look at that. See, it's just working out. And for this, the fact that it says pin means definitely pin. Don't try to fudge this. It's not going to work. And have you seen that I've carefully pinned everything on this one? Maybe that is one thing that makes it an intermediate pattern, that it doesn't just exactly go together. Probably the more foxes I make, the easier they will get, but I'm pretty sure you still have to pin because the way that this pattern is, it does fit, but I don't think it fits by accident. I think you really have to be diligent about your pinning to make sure everything matches up. Okay. And so now I'm going to just go with the rest of it here. Again, lining up a little bit at a time and just seeing how it works out. All right, I have the inner and outer back leg pieces sewn to the body and the tummy right here. You can see that. Next it says I need to sew this tummy dart closed, and that's right here. And so I'm going to sew it with a 1/4 inch seam. And here she suggests that you change to a matching thread so that it won't show through. And since I'm using a light gray thread, I'm going to just keep that because hopefully it won't show. Just sewing a quick 1/4 inch seam here. Let's see here. And it's like the dart is really short, so I don't even have to speed the video up. At this point, I'm really not sure how long this video is going. I'm just going to go ahead and finish up the fox, and if it's a long video, then that'll just have to be what it is. Okay, so next we're going to do the foot dart closed on. It says so the foot dart closed at D on both foot back pieces. So I'm going to move that out of the way because I'm going to need it in just a minute. So let's see. Back foot pieces. Where are they? Right here. So here are the back foot pieces. I'm going to pull the pattern piece out just so I can know where the dart is. I think I know where it is. But let me pull the pattern piece. And I never got around to gluing the pattern pieces onto the template plastic. But that's okay because I'm pretty sure I'm going to make another one of these and I'll take care of it at that time, probably. So let's see. I'm just going to look here because I think the dart is right here. So it's this little seam right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch it closed right here for both of the feet. So that they will be easy to access. Okay, now it says, so the back foot pieces closed. Oh wait, no. Let me look at it. So the back foot pieces to the inner and outer back leg pieces from M, K, M. So let's see. If I'm looking at the outer back leg, here's the pattern piece. So I'm sewing from M to K to M. I do need to find the pattern pieces just to verify, even though I feel like it's right here, but I want to verify it anyway. So let me see if I can find those pieces. Back leg. Got it. Okay. So now I will put these back, and it'll be so much easier if I get the pieces glued down, because it's just less paper to deal with, less stuff to deal with. All right, so for the back foot, it's going to be the inner seam here. So from M to K to M. So here are the outer back legs. So yeah, so this is the seam that we're doing. I'm going to put it right sides together, I think. So it's going to be it's this seam. So M to M, and then K is right in the middle of those. So I'm just going to pin these here. Here's the other M. Scoot it around. Get a nice pin here. Okay. And so it should fit nicely around this curve. I'm just going to try to fit everything in and pin it. And I think I'll do both of these. I'll pin both of them, then I'll sew both of them, so that you can see that whole process. I'm not sure what happened with the last video. I hope that we got everything that that you needed for that one. But what I've already done is I have stitched the this is the back foot piece to the inner and outer back leg. So this is the foot, and these are the inner and outer back legs. And now it says to sew the back pieces closed at so the back foot pieces No, I already did that. So the back foot piece is closed at the back from F to M. Then continue sewing the inner and outer leg pieces closed at the back from L to M, from M to LP. And then sew the tummy and body pieces together from LP to O. Okay, I had to read it like a lot of times, but I think I got it now. So what I'm going to do is sew for each side, I'm going to sew the back foot pieces together from F to M. And on the pattern, let me see. I don't know if you can see this, but on the pattern, that's just this little bitty seam right here. Okay, so I'm taking this one foot and I'm going to sew it together like this. And basically, I'm going to just match the seams. Actually, that seam got closed up in there a little bit. I'm going to clip it. This is really rigged, what I'm about to do, but I'm going to open it up a little bit so that the seam is actually, because I accidentally sewed some of that together. So I'm just going to open that up right there. Okay. Oh, it has a little hole. Dang it. Dang it, dang it, dang it. You see that little hole? I have to decide what I'm going to do about that, how I'm going to patch it up. I'll figure it out. Okay, so I'm going to sew the back leg together here from F to M. Is that right? Yeah. And then I'm going to, basically, you're just sewing it all the way together to the center seam. That's all. That's basically all I'm doing. So I'm going to pin all of this. I will have to figure out how I'm going to patch the hole that I just created, but I'll figure it out. I'll show you on camera what I do with it, I think. So I'm just going to pin. I'm going to pin the edges first, or like the outer seams first, just like I do every time. And I was just thinking of a way that I can rig it up a little bit by just sewing a bigger than a 1/4 inch seam, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to figure it out. Okay, so that, and then actually I'm going to sew the last one, the next one again. And this is going to have a 1/4 inch overlap, I think, because the back is going to eventually get sewn together. So I'm going to go ahead and create that 1/4 inch overlap now. And then pin. Because my understanding, I think that we're pinning to the center, not through the center. And I'm going to pin it on both sides. Now I'm going to match the seams here. Or try my best to match the seams. We'll see how it ends up. Okay, and then there's the other one. That's the one that I cut and made a hole. Okay, and then I'm just going to pin the rest of this. Now there is one interesting part. This L, let me show you. I'll show you on the pattern piece. It has a little angle down, so I'm just going to kind of be careful with that and let that be a part of it. I want to make sure that I take that into account when I'm stitching it together. I don't know that it matters, but of course you don't know until it's too late. So I'm just going to try my best to make it even, make it like with that little angle in it. Okay. And so I'm going to sew on either side. I'm going to sew to this seam. I don't think I'm going to overlap. I don't think I'm going to sew through it right now. And it doesn't really say to, so I'm going to hold out and see what happens. All right, now I'm going to pin the other side. Doing the same things, matching the outer seams on this one. Thankfully, I didn't sew that part together, so I don't have to worry about cutting that. And then I'm going to sew up to, I'm going to pin, leaving that 1/4 inch because I think I'm going to need it later. Okay, so I have that center seam where it's sewn the bottom together, and I did leave a little gap here for that 1/4 inch, and I think that's going to get sewn down in a little bit when the back gets sewn together. The next step is to add the foot pieces here, or the foot pads. Let me get them. And right now I really want to turn it inside out. I really do, and see it, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to try and be patient and get it all sewn first. I only see one foot pad. Where's the other foot pad? Here it is. Okay, and just as a quick little, D is going to be where the dart is for this one, and then F is this bottom seam. So I'm going to go ahead, since you've already seen me do that for one section, I'm not going to do this part on camera, but I'll come back after it's done and show it to you. All right, so I've sewn, sorry. I've sewn the foot pads to the back feet. And the only thing I want to tell you is that when you're in this little section, when you're sewing around the foot pad, just be careful. There's a lot of fabric here, so it was a little challenging to pin and to stitch. But just because it's so much, so you'll just have to move your, make sure that you move everything around to try to keep this out of the way. But it's still doable. Oh, that's the wrong side. So here, both of the foot pads, and I did go ahead and clip the curves, so you can see it right here where I've kind of clipped them. And I'm getting excited because we're so close, so close. All right, so the next step is now to do the tail. Okay, and so the tail has two parts. It's the tail and the tail tip. It says sew the tail tip to the tail pieces in pairs, matching the star markings. So I pulled out 2 of my pattern pieces just so I can see what that's going to look like. And so if these both are right side up, so if I match the tail pieces, this is what that's going to look like. So I'm going to lay it out first. So I'll do this one goes with this one, and I'll flip those right sides together, and then this one goes with that one. And so I'll flip right sides together just to make sure the stars match, and then I'll put them together. But I think before I do that, I didn't mark where the holes need to, or the gap needs to be for stuffing. So I'm going to do that right quick here, just so you can see that, this is by no means perfect. I'm still learning and growing. I'm marking the wrong side of the fabric because that'll be easier. It'll be wrong sides out. So, okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this one, except I'm going to turn the pattern upside down and just put the marks. And really you only need one set of marks, but because you're only going to be looking at one side of the fabric. But I'm just going to mark both because I don't know which side is going to be up. Okay, so I will speed this up for the camera, but I'll show the whole thing. So here we go. I'm just going to put it right sides together and start sewing. So I have my finished tail. I have clipped the seams here, and then I've trimmed the tail tip. Not super tight, but I've trimmed it. And then it says it has directions. There's also directions about changing the thread in the tip of the tail so that it doesn't show. So be mindful of that. And then now it says to turn the tail right sides out. Okay, excited about this. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. And then I'll probably use one of my my little stuffing tools to get the tip out really nice. Oh, never mind. That's a pretty good tip, I think. But I think that's good enough for me. And then I'm just kind of going through my fingers to make sure that that turns nicely. And then, okay, so here's the tail. Let me make sure that that's as big as it can go. All right, okay. So now it says, push the tip of the tail between the body pieces. I feel like I need to look at it and make sure. So the tail has to go up. Okay. Push the tip of the tail between the body pieces through the gap you left for the tail. Wait a minute. I feel like I missed a step here. Let me go back because maybe this should already be sewn together. Let's look and see. Let's go back. Da-da-da-da. Okay, so the body pieces together from O to N. Oh! So it looks like I skipped a step here. Let me go back and look. It says from O to N. Wait, but where's... No, I didn't skip a step. But where's O? But this is Q to N. Wait, but O is, I think O is this seam, but it didn't say that. So what I'm going to do, because this pattern piece doesn't say O, and let me go back a page. Let's go back a page just to make sure that I didn't miss something. I don't think I missed anything. But on the body, there's no O. So I just have to be mindful of that for next time, because O is the seam at the dart. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that together. That's why it was missing earlier. Leaving a gap for the tail. So... Oh, I know what I did. But I'm going to, because it looks like the seam that I did that was right here, it should have been from the bottom here up to here. So this is the part that should be left open for stuffing. Should I rip it out and do it again? I am not, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I already clipped this seam. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to sew it from here to here, and then I'm going to put this gap in for the tail, and I'm going to leave this part, and I'm going to stuff through this part. I know it's going to be challenging because of the head, but I'm just going to try it that way and see if it works. I probably could, there is a way that I could fix this by, actually, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab my seam ripper, and then I'm going to show you how to fix this. That way, if you make the same error, then you can fix it. And I encourage you to watch the whole video first before you, or watch the whole series before you try to make this item. Actually, no, I don't want to do that. But I'll tell you what I would do. If I messed up this way and I want to go back and fix it, I would take the stitches out, and then I would stay stitch along the side. So I'd stitch an 1/8 of an inch inside the seam allowance, and then I would go ahead and finish stitching. Oh, now I'm changing my mind again, because I think I want to show you what that looks like. Because I think the stay stitching is going to help anyway. Let me grab my seam ripper. I'll be right back. Okay, So I have my seam ripper. I'm going to go ahead and pull out these stitches here. And since the main issue is that I've already clipped these seams, so what I'm going to do is after I've pulled this thread out, and I suppose it's good to see this on camera. You know, you hate to admit that you made a mistake, but really if I have the pattern in front of me, I don't have a choice, so there's that. So I'm just taking these stitches out, and okay, and I could leave it the way it was, but I think it would be harder to stuff that way. I'm concerned about being able to stuff it. Okay, so here you can see that I've already clipped the seam allowance, but it's not too far in, but I don't want this to come apart later. So what I'm going to do is just put a stitch right where like from this mark all the way up about 1/8 of an inch. So you'll see that, and then I'll go back and sew the whole thing closed. There we go. So here is the stay stitch, and again it's 1/8 of an inch, so it's like in the seam allowance. It's not gonna show anyway, but I'm making sure to stitch in the seam allowance so that that'll close up nicely and it won't fray, hopefully. Alright, so I went back and I stitched everything down. I had some problems with I guess it was with my thread, and I rethreaded and it seemed to be okay, but we'll see. Alright, now I'm going to take the tail, and I have it pointed up. And actually, before I do that, let me see if you can see this. Look how this fox is going to sit. You see that? Oh my gosh, with the little legs. So cute. Anyway, back to focusing. Alright, let me go back to the right page. It says, push the tip of the tail between the body pieces through the gap you left for the tail. So here we go. And then just going to push it in here like so, and then line up the raw edges so I can stitch it down. And she gives a tip to sew it with a zigzag stitch. And I've never actually used a zigzag stitch on my machine, so I'm not sure if I want to try it on this particular thing, but it can't, in the grand scheme of things, it can't hurt. Okay, I'm going to hold the raw edges here and give it a nice pin. And there's plenty of room for the tail. I actually have a lot of space here. Okay, so when I stitch it, I'm going to stitch it. Actually, I think I'm going to do a straight stitch, and then I'll go back and do a zigzag stitch. Okay, because there is, you see that there's a big gap. Well, not a big gap, but there's a gap on either side of the tail. So I'm just going to do a straight stitch, probably forward and back a couple times, and then in the seam allowance I'll do a zigzag if I can. So here we go. Okay, so now I added my zigzag stitch here, so hopefully the tail will be nice and secure, except I just realized that I added my zigzag up here, and it should be down there where the tail actually is. So I'm going to go back and fix that, and I will be right back. I have the zigzag finally in the right place. So now it's time to add the head. I'm going to cut some of these threads right quick. And, oops, excuse me. Okay, so now it says that it's time to sew the head to the body. And what she suggests is that you pin, or that you turn the head right side out, which is right side out, and put it inside the body for the pinning. So I'm going to do that. I have the head right side up, and the front is going to line up with this mark. This center seam here is going to line up with this mark. So I'm going to put that in there and line that up, and I'll go ahead and pin. Okay, so let's see, I'll pin this one. And actually, the way that this is done, to me, this seems a little easier than what I normally do, because there's an opening to sew around. So I'll show you that in just a second. All right, and then these seams will line up. So this is you're pinning the cheek pieces and the cheek and back head pieces to the tummy and body pieces. So these two seams are going to line up, and I guess I'll open them. Okay. So I rather like this part because I think it's going to be a little bit easier to stitch. And I think the reason it's like that is because this fox is so little. Okay, and then I had an error in what I thought was going to happen for the stuffing, but I'll tell you about that in just a minute. And then these edges will line up. And then I'm going to pin here. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. So the cheek and the head back pieces go to the body and the tummy pieces. So line up these seams and put a pin. And then line up the edges here and put a pin. All right, and then I'm just going to kind of line everything up here and put a couple pins where I feel like I need them. So I have the head sewn onto the neck of this, to the body of the fox. Now the only thing I have left to do is to turn the fox right sides out. It does say to clip the seams first. So, well, no, let me see. Yeah, it says I need to clip it first, and then turn. No, wait, no, it doesn't. Okay, I'll go ahead and clip these. I don't think I need to clip the head. I'm not going to clip those. Okay, then it says pin, pull the head back out of the body so everything is wrong sides out. Okay, then it says to pin and sew the fox closed back here. And so it says from N to Q. And N is the seam on the body, and then Q is this this mark on the head. I said the seam. This is the mark, and then this is the mark on the head. So I'm going to pin it here. So I'm going to try to match these marks this time. Okay. So I'm just going to pin this and sew it. Then I'll be ready to turn this fox inside out. So I'm excited to be at this point. I have the entire little fox sewn, and all I'm going to do is pull it through this hole. This hole in the back of the head is actually going to be the hole that we stuffed the whole the whole fox through. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it inside out. I have not done this yet at all. So I'm going to be seeing it for the first time with you right now. So here we go. Just turning it, and it's not easy. It's not hard to pull through, so that's good. That means that this hole is plenty large enough. Okay, so I'm just gonna push out the little feet. Oh my goodness. Okay, and I may grab my my little stuffing tool if I feel like I need to push some out. Here's the tail. And here's the back foot. Oh, it's so cute. Okay. There's another front foot. And this is in real time, so you can see about how long it takes to, or how long it's taking me to do this. Here's another front foot. Okay, and here's the other back foot. Okay. And that's it. Look at that. So when it's stuffed, this is kind of how it's going to sit. Let me see. I have a few threads I need to cut. And then once it's done, once I get done stuffing it, I'm going to stitch the nose on. And I think I'll show you that process. There are some directions about how to do that as well. Here's the little tail. So I love the way the contrasting fabric looks in this little fox. It's really cute. And the pattern I feel like it stretched me, but it wasn't too challenging. I did find myself having to read over the instructions a few times before I sewed something, and I think that's okay. I think that's a good way to learn and try something new. Let's see, the only thing that I would do differently for next time, I would be more diligent about writing the little markings on my fabric pieces. I feel like I did a good job putting them on the pattern pieces, the template plastic, but I didn't mark them well enough on my fabric, and it caused me a little bit of confusion at times. And then there was one part on the pattern that wasn't marked, and that was that letter O. So but I went back and I added that, and so next time I make this fox, I'll be a little bit more prepared about it, but I still think it was simple enough. Again, the pattern is recommended for intermediate sewers, and so if you're a beginner, you probably could try it, but just be mindful that it is have a little bit of challenge in it. Okay, so my next step, of course, is going to be to stuff this bad boy, and we're going to see how he or she turns out. What do you think? Do you think this is a he fox or a she fox? Let me know in the comments what you think. I probably won't really make a decision about it until after I've stuffed it. So again, this pattern is the Fifi Fox pattern. Let me see if I can find that first page. By Funky Friends Factory. It was written by Pauline MacArthur. and you can find it on Etsy. It's going to be linked below. So make sure you check it out. If you purchase a pattern, please let her know that that you saw my video series. I'll also put a link to the other videos in this series as well. If you have any questions about what you've seen in this video, leave them in the comments below. Thumbs up this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!